think we're 20 years old. And telecommunications, especially mobile, is what we would call a capex intensive industry. You need to invest a lot to run a network. And it's critical for society. It's really critical for society. Now, where we are today is that we're at a crossroads. So we have, over the last 4 years, particularly, we invested $400 million in expanding 4G network. 4G enables you to do anything you want to do on mobile internet, what you need to do. So I think it's a really great baseline to operate from. So that's where we are. Now, we need to do much more than that. So one of the things we're working very feverishly on is to expand the business into what we call a digital operator. From V on, you will see sometimes we have in the, the information for investors, we call it DO, digital operator, 1440. That's the number of minutes there are in a day. Because how many companies can actually have access and provide an opportunity to a customer to do something any minute of the day? I think only mobile phone can. I sometimes realize that this is probably the device I use most by far. Much more than my laptop, much more than a tablet, much more than TV. So this has become, especially on 4G smartphone, it's your gateway to the world. That's how I see it. So now we deliver already connectivity, which is great, but what else can we deliver? So we have developed, and we will develop more, what we call verticals. Now it's a bit of an internal industrial word, but it basically means digital solutions. So we have Toffee. So one of the main things people do on a mobile device is look for entertainment, want to see things, want to watch things, whether that's sports, whether it's series, that's one. The second one, which we will be working on and keen on, are mobile financial services. Public secret, absolutely. And again, if you look at where the country sits, half of the population doesn't have access to banking. And I mean, it's almost unimaginable, right, in this day and age.
Yeah.
How do you manage your financial streams? And that's also important, I think, for government, for society. If you look at a characteristic of successful societies, is actually making things accessible. Services which are really important, not only for customers, for society, but also for government, because you start tracking and tracing everything. Yeah. And then it becomes much fairer and much better for everyone. So that's one. And then we're also very keen, we started doing that in education and health. So those are the verticals which we're actively working on. The other one which we have developed, which we carved out now separately, is RISE, which is an AI-driven telco solution, in my language, for youngsters. Because we believe we have an important role to play, enabling youngsters, students, to be more successful and to give them a window of an outlook on the world. So that's where we stand, and that's what we're doing. Number one would be providing a even better mobile experience in combination with service. So that will be enhancing mobile network connectivity, expand coverage, because I think we can still do more, and delivering service on the back of verticals. So we will be investing quite a fair bit of money in developing financial solutions. We're very gung-ho in terms of developing solutions in health, and also very determined to provide society with, if you ask me, my personal dream, with very accessible educational services, so that we can help people to get a better life. Wow, that too. I think now we get into, I would say, something which I've been saying quite a few times repeatedly. I think one of the biggest hurdles we have today as an industry is taxation. I mean, if there's a Champions League or a Guinness Book World Record for taxation, then I think this industry in this country is winning it. 65 to 70% of the 100 taka we get from a customer, we give immediately to government. So that leaves us 35 taka out of 100 to invest and to run the business with. And yeah, again, you don't need a PhD to understand that's a bit difficult. That's also the reason why I think the industry is struggling a little bit. So taxation is hurdle number one. The other one is a more structural one, but and I'll come to that in a second as well, is the regulation. So unfortunately, regulation, and it's difficult for regulators these days, because earlier today I heard something around the how AI is changing the information flow in this case in healthcare. So I just don't pin me on the numbers exactly, but if you go back 50 years, the knowledge about healthcare doubled every, make it up, decade. Today it's doubling every day on the back of AI. So from a regulatory point of view, with all the developments in technology, cyber, and all that sort of things, the evolution is so fast, it's very challenging for regulators to keep up, in all fairness. But here we feel that the regulation is quite fragmented, and fragmentation in this business means that it limits the opportunity to really scale and invest. And we're in a scale business, so ideally regulation is probably a bit more lenient. Now, having said all that, we've seen over the last 3-4 months some really good initiatives, both from regulatory bodies as well as from other government institutions, to help us with that. But having said that, great start, but the industry would definitely welcome more changes and a review of the taxation. Last week there was, on the back of that, also on a report presented by GSMA. GSMA is the sort of global telco group, if I can call it that way, global association for mobile operators. And they, of course, have the luxury of benchmarking left, right, and center, all kinds of elements and parameters. So one of the things they benchmark was spectrum cost. Big ticket item for telcos is always spectrum cost. And spectrum cost is treated differently in countries, very differently. So some countries see it as, if we make spectrum affordable, telcos will embrace it and invest, and then provide a much better communication service for the country, which then enables other businesses and consumers to excel in life and to bring more benefit to the country, to grow GDP. Some countries, it's a more short-term policy, like, oh yeah, we can collect quite a fair bit of money for spectrum fee. Great, but then of course for the operators it becomes really difficult to invest. So if you look at taxation level, which I mentioned, and so on, versus spectrum cost, that's a challenge. Now again, good movements there. Will it be enough? I would say to be determined. And linked to that, the other challenge, and this is also something I've been reflecting on quite a fair bit, investors like predictability. And investors look through a global lens. So they look at, okay, I got 100 million to spend, and then they have their own sort of vendor matrices where they determine based on how to invest. And yeah, if taxation is high and uncertainty is there, then of course there is it's a higher risk profile, as we would call it. So people will look at it. Having said that, maybe a closing note on this question is that we had a long debate with Vion, our group, our shareholder, and Vion is super excited and super determined about the country. Okay. So very determined to invest. I mean, besides the $400 million, we have a sizable investment lined up for the coming years to drive the business forward, because there is significant untapped potential on one side, and B, tremendous opportunities for society to get more out of what we have today as a group. Fun fact, 6G is more or less around the corner. 6G is being tested in labs, sort of slated to be operationally deployed in 2030. Okay. And 6G is going to offer speeds which are 10 to 100 times faster than what we have today. So here we are today. If you look at what is driving the experience of speed, I'm not sure how often you do a speed test on your phone. Your speed experience will be extremely variable. It will depend on multiple factors. Mobile networks, by pure physics, are dynamic in terms of performance based on the load they get. So if you're the only customer on a base station and you're standing right below the base station, depending on your device, that's another factor, and depending on the backhaul of the network and multiple factors, there will be a certain speed. So in Singapore on a 4G network, where I came from, it was typically performed between 80 to 200, even to 400 Mbps. And 5G is this myth of making everything better. You can today, in this country, you can enhance the performance of mobile network 4G quite a lot by, number one, getting the right power to the base station. Number two, if we would have a simplification of permits to build base stations where required and where needed. Number three is backhaul, which is a different license. Then you would already enhance 4G performance tremendously. So 5G, our view is that it's a bit early in the country, and it's not necessarily going to deliver you a better experience because it sits on the same spectrum, and it's not a standalone network. So maybe technically speaking, there's two types of 5G. Number one is non-standalone, as we call it. Second one is standalone. Non-standalone, if you have a very good 4G network, it will improve marginally, but not a lot. Standalone is a separate network. That is it's just like you're going from a propeller plane to a jet plane. That has differences in terms of experience. But then our conclusion was that at the time is that 5G SA only makes sense for large corporate enterprise solutions. So, for example, if you were, again, sorry for my reference bit, but Singapore, we used to have 5G SA sliced network for the port of Singapore because they all have, the container movements were robotic. And then it's not so much about the speed, but more about the latency, because the better the latency, the more accurate the operations can be conducted. So you really talk about a specific use case, as we would call it. But if you look across the world, 5G has been hyped in many countries, but didn't bring too much more than 4G, unfortunately. Our dream would be to leapfrog, actually, for this country, honestly speaking, from 4G to 6G, with an overlay on satellite. That would be ideal. Because what you then do is you basically cover all use cases for customers, meaning coverage no matter where and what. That's primary. No coverage, who cares about speed, right? And today, unfortunately, in the country, there's still a lot of areas where it's not optimal. Second, if you have 6G, then you really talk about a super tangible difference in terms of experience of speed. I mean, if I can give you one other parallel to this, in Singapore, we launched 10 Gbps home broadband. The fastest we had till 2-3 years ago was 1. If you do not have 50 devices connected, you're not multiple streaming simultaneously on 5 PCs, some movies or anything, you won't see the difference. That's reality. We will be doing much more. Let me start this way. So there's, I would say, 2 hurdles today when it comes to digital divide. The first one, the biggest one, would be device availability, accessibility, I should say. The price differential between a 2G and a 4G phone for many people is still prohibitive. So we need to make devices more affordable, 4G devices, and that's something we're going to do very soon. That's the biggest hurdle. The second hurdle, I would say, is ensuring that people can use the service any point in time, anywhere. Today it rains. If it rains like this in some of the regions, we see immediately power disruption to base stations. And then, no power. We have batteries in all our base stations, so we can keep them running for 8 hours, 10 hours. But quite a few times it takes more than that for power to be restored. So then there's no base station, so then there is no connectivity. So these are all kinds of basics, if you talk. So it's not one silver bullet again, but device availability, accessibility, affordability is definitely one. And second is really make sure that the infrastructure in totality can support continuous data connectivity, or for that sake, voice connectivity. Which brings us also back to things like satellite, new technology, and so forth, right? Let me make it a bit more Banglalink personal. If you talk to people in the company, and for that sake, people in the street, and you ask them, hey, what is something you remember about Banglalink? A lot of people will go back almost 20 years ago and say, oh, you had this lovely commercial where you had the sun and the fisherman, and then, the father discovered he could have a mobile phone, and that enabled him to actually have a better life because he then realized he could call someone to buy his fish. That's a simple feature phone 15, 20 years ago, 2G. Today, I wish and want this to be anyone has a 4G phone and there's also something we need to do, the access not only to internet, but also provide solutions to make life better. Why can't we, for example, set up a marketplace that people can tap into? Why can't we provide supporting insurance? Why can't we provide virtual healthcare? So the way I see this device with a good internet connection is that you have a gateway to the world. You have a gateway to solutions. We discuss mobile financial solutions. Why can't he do his transaction online, get the money, rather than having to wait for someone to send it? So there's a lot of things we can do if we have the right tools into play. What we can do is we can simplify things significantly. We can make it even much more simpler and accessible. So I'll give you a benchmark. Probably till 4 years ago, even in an advanced country like Singapore, you had to go to a physical bank outlet to get your bank account opened. Today, I can literally, within a minute, open my bank account and get a virtual credit card on the spot. On the spot. I don't need to go anywhere. I don't need to fill in any physical form. I can do that. Then what it does is it enables me, because the operating model of that particular bank works in a way that you have less cost, they will give me a higher interest rate. It's a big plus for me as a customer. Second, they will enable smarter, real-time, cheaper transactions. Second, it can actually offer you microcredits. Because one thing we know as a telco very well is we know you as a customer. We know what device you have, we know what you do. So we are perfectly suited to profile and say, oh, he's a great customer, he wants to borrow 1,000 Tak or whatever it is, we can do that. And then you create opportunities for people again in society. I think any shareholder, any company likes the regulatory regime to enable to have, I would say, sufficient amount of control on the business. It's quite unusual, for example, to work in this business where licenses are split between fixed, mobile, international gateway and so on. All the other countries I am familiar with, that's actually end-to-end. Now, here it is fragmented. I don't know why. But what it does, it actually makes it's almost like it makes it difficult to have end-to-end control on service because you're dependent on other parties. And they come with a cost and they come with complexity. Most countries where you see successful execution, end-to-end control, because if someone doesn't invest, for example, in an international gateway, you can do whatever you like here in creating the bandwidth for data. But if you've got a choke point just off the coast for traffic going to wherever, you've got a problem. So that, I think, that sort of delayering, this sort of defragmentation of policies, I think is very important for mainly ensuring quality of service, and secondly, cost in that ecosystem. The second, coming back to the earlier point, is that, total taxation. Again, the GSMA report is quite interesting in that. The effect of GDP growth, telco can realize, let's call it indirect, facilitating other businesses, is totally underestimated. If you go back to countries like Korea or Singapore, which have been extremely aggressive on rolling out, for example, fixed broadband, can you imagine they basically fiberized the whole nation, well ahead of anyone else? Why? Because they really believed that if they were able to do that, they would create much more, I would say, robust infrastructure on telco side, carrying huge amounts of data, providing a much better service to customers and business to be able to compete better worldwide. And that has to be the thinking, both for physical infrastructure as well as for digital infrastructure. Now, in order to do that, you don't do that by having too high taxation, because then shareholder will say, okay, sorry, that's not so sure if I can return my money back on that, so I'll go somewhere else. So if that can be changed, it's almost like what happens in the world right now. Some countries, I'll impose additional import duties. Does that grow the world economy? No. It actually limits world economy, because ultimately you need to believe, yes, you are competitive or you're not competitive. And in this case, I think it would be great if people can have the belief that if you create progressive, state-of-the-art infrastructure by enabling investments, and then we're talking about foreign investments in all telcos, by the way, not to be neglected, then you stage the country to be doing so much better. I mean, this morning we had a talk about AI, and if something uses a lot of bandwidth and data, it's basically AI and video. And one of the reasons why China is able to produce so effectively, so fast and so cheap and be so efficient is because of the fact that everything is data-based. Now, in order to make, and on AI, so they basically develop models and agents to steer machines. Now, to do that, you didn't need to have a state-of-the-art data network because it needs to keep up with all these things. So you can do it on 4G, by the way, today. If you have the right spectrum, you got the right backhaul, you can do that. One thing I'm particularly proud of here in the company is that we have something which we call SAP. It's a too complicated word for something to say. We hire every year very talented youth coming from university, and we give them, in my language, a fast track in terms of career development. So they rotate through different roles through the company, and I think that's brilliant. And we have actually a side track to that, which is encouraging young females to come into workforce and have that experience and to grow them. I still think we can do more in terms of more sustained training and coaching. That's something we're going to work on. That's one thing. Then we have a number of CSR activities running. So we do things with schools, less privileged. Again, my dream is that we can make that bigger and more impactful. We're doing a lot. We're doing great stuff in terms of enabling them internet access and all that sort of things. And then we also do quite a few things on the green side, because as probably people know, telco industry, especially data centers and that sort of businesses, require a lot of energy. So we have been progressively, let's call it greenify today, our base station. So wherever we can put a solar panel on top of a base station, we do that. So we don't need electricity. A, power outage, we're resilient. B, better for the environment. And again, I think we can push ourselves and expand that as well to be more self-sufficient when it comes to energy. Recently, we did quite an extensive tree plantation exercise with all the staff. So yeah, we're doing quite a few things. So it's centered around enabling new talents, young people, to come in the workforce and help them to grow as a person and become better and stronger. Less privileged in society across, and we have a few ideas which I would love to talk about, but I don't think that would be good because we still need to run it internally to work it out. But you can expect something in the next 6 months.